All right. We seem to be kind of leveling out. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If anyone trickles in the last couple of minutes, the first couple of slides are logistical, so shouldn't miss too much. And I always do say, don't worry, we are recording this. So you guys can all see the right part of my screen. It sounds like apparently y'all were seeing my crazy, messy desktop at the beginning of this. Everyone can actually see our presentation now. Apologies if that gave anybody like PTSD. All right, so just to let you guys know here, this is a Zoom webinar, which means that your lines are on mute. We cannot see or hear you. We would love to see you all, but unfortunately that's not how this works. So if you do have questions at any point in the session, we would love to hear them, but you're gonna have to use the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please send those in at any point. If it makes sense, we'll maybe like pause the conversation and take care of those questions in real time, but if not, we will save time at the end to get through all of those questions. And then this is being recorded. Tomorrow you will get this recording. You will get the deck as well. So if you see stats or information that you really care about, don't worry about scribbling it down. You'll have all of this. And that should all be in your inbox by end of day tomorrow. So let's get started by letting me introduce the amazing women that I have joining me today. The first is Julie. Julie is at SUNY Oneonta, and I'm going to let her introduce herself real quick.
Hi, so my name is Julie, and I work in the Office of Student Experience at SUNY Oneonta. We are a four-year comprehensive public university in upstate New York, and we're about 3.5 hours from New York City. So a pretty quick bus trip to New York City, but the surrounding area where we are in Otsego County is very, 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 very rural. So one of the things that is kind of unusual about our first gen populations is that we have a lot of people who are coming from New York City and Long Island, but then also a lot of people from the rural area where we're located.
Great, thanks. And then we've got a twofer here. We have both Dana and Randy, who are from the University of Alabama. Can you guys both introduce yourself in your respective roles?
Yes, I'll go first. I'm Dana Beckers, and I am the Director of Parent and Family Programs at the University of Alabama. And I work very closely with Randy Ham. She is a wonderful person that works with the students. And then I work with the parents. I'm going to let Randy introduce herself. I am new to the University of Alabama. I actually hit my 1-year mark tomorrow. So still kind of learning. Came from a smaller liberal arts school before coming to Alabama.
And I'm Randy Ham. I'm the manager of First Gen Programs. Excited to be here today. We are going to talk a little bit more about our office in a few slides from now. But I will say that I'm the first person who's ever been hired at UA to fully focus on our First Gen population on campus. As a former First Gen student here at the University of Alabama, many years ago, I like to tell my students in the 1900s is when I started school here. It is very exciting to now be on this side of things to help cultivate this first gen community. I spent 9 years actually not too far from you, Julie. I was in New York City for 9 years. Like I said, never thought I would come back to the state of Alabama, but life has a way of doing that to you. I came back about 8 years ago. I've been on campus ever since, and I've been in this role close to 1.5 years now.
Great. And then we have my esteemed colleague, Tawana. You want to introduce yourself and a little bit of your history before you were at CampusESP?
Of course. So I am Tawana Brown, and I worked at the University of Alabama. So you get a 3-for-1 here. I was a student there in the 1900s as well, around Randy's time, and then started working there soon after. So I worked there for 10 years, and the last position I had was the Assistant Director of Parent and Family Programs, where Dana was my boss. She came in, like she said, a year ago, and so I transitioned to CampusESP probably about 8 months ago, and so glad to be here. My role is account manager, so I was a former user of the platform, and so what I do now is really help some of our partners really utilize the platform to engage their families, and I provide strategy and kind of best practice. So glad to be here.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. this is the point where you have to listen to me talk for about 45 seconds, and then I promise we will get to the important information here. But for those of you who don't know much about Campus ESP, I know we have a mix of current customers as well as some people who aren't working with us right now. Just to give you a little bit of context on who we are and why we are hosting this webinar and why we care about this audience so much. Well, we are a comprehensive family engagement platform. We are honored to work with over 400 schools coast to coast right now. And we have over 9 million families within all of those different portal experiences, which is kind of amazing and mind-blowing. What we really try to do is give various different offices on different campuses a tool that comprehensively allows them to engage families in the name of student success. So that is a branded portal experience, emails, SMS texting. We have an event management platform in there. We can do e-commerce. We really want to make it easy for your families and for you to get all the information they need to support their students. But software is not really helpful unless you know how to use it and use it well. So we have people like Tawana. We have an amazing team of account managers. We have a great customer success team. We really try to get you up and running fast and work with you on a regular basis to make sure you're utilizing everything that we offer, that you have creative ideas on how to engage your families, and that you're really feeling successful in what you're doing. And to prove that, we also have a really comprehensive analytics background. There's a platform dashboard that gives you a ton of information. We also try to elevate the really important pieces to you. So if you don't have time to go through all of that data, you still know that you're getting a good ROI and you're seeing that your families are engaging, and you can figure out how to keep doing what's best for them. And if you do want to learn more after this webinar about first-gen families or about Campus ESP, our website is the obvious place to go. If you go to our blogs and resources section, we have a ton of research and case studies and webinar recordings, so you can get even more information and just learn some more ways that you might be able to engage your parents and families. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tawana to get into the meat here, some of our data that we have around serving first-generation families.
Thank you so much, Mel. So excited to be here. So my colleagues and my friends know when I start a presentation, I like to normally tell a story or a joke to kind of get the nerves out. And so I was going to tell y'all a joke about the time that I did time travel, but y'all didn't think that was too funny. So what we're going to do instead is kind of hop into our presentation. And I want to first talk about some data to really get things going. I want to give you a sneak peek of our soon to be release. So you're getting the first view of a report that we do with R&L. And so this is our 2024 report that will be coming out soon. And what we did was we asked families about what information that they find important. And what we found in that area is that families kind of found all of the information. First gen and continuing generation families found that the information was important that you see on the screen. But what we did find that was different was there was about a 20-point difference in first gen families knowing where to find information. So they found that these topics were important, but they didn't know at their current institution where to find this information. And what that says to me is that as institutions kind of inform parents and families, they need to make sure that they are intentional about letting them know where they can get information from. So then we're going to hop into the next slide. This number 59% here, I want you to kind of hone in on this. So this blew my mind. What we found is that 59% of first-gen families talk to their students daily. So as my Alabama pastor says, if this doesn't light a fire under you, your wood is wet, right? You should be able to see here that first-gen families are going to be your key to your engagement strategy, okay? They are talking to their students on a regular basis. In the 1900s, when I was in school, this was not a thing. I talked to my parents maybe every 2 weeks. Unfortunately, my mom did not like that, but it was just not a thing, right? I was engaged in campus life and doing things, and I was also a first generation student. At that time, I did not know because my brother went to college, but I didn't know that I still was considered first gen. But 59% of families are talking to their first gen students on a regular basis. I want to pause here and ask some of our panelists, what are their thoughts about this? Are they seeing that their students are engaging with their families, and how is this impactful in their strategy and outreach?
I can jump in here. I would say right away, we're meeting our students and our families at the same time at our orientation session, which we call Bama Bound, all summer long. And those parents are really engaged. And there are, of course, a handful of students who are coming without parents, without families. And I always give them big kudos. You are so brave. You are here. You are stepping out doing this on your own. But for the most part, our parents and families are very engaged. And what I find is special about them is they're very willing to kind of hand their student over to us. There's a lot of trust there, but the parent really does still want to be engaged. And for a lot of my students, their parents are still their first call when they're making decisions about things. So similar to you, Tawana, I talked to my mom about once every 2 weeks when I was in college, my dad once a week, never about college though, kind of just a check-in, not about what was actually going on campus, my grades, decisions about major, that sort of stuff. So that's a shift I'm definitely seeing. I think our students do talk to their parents about that, even if their parents don't necessarily know how to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things now. Parents are partners, right? And they engage with their students. And so at the end of the day, we know, you can go to the next slide, Mel. Thanks. At the end of the day, we know that you're trying your best to really support your students at your institution. While you're doing that, make sure you let their parents help you support them. Like I said, that 59% should be a very much eye-opening thing that should be able to help you provide families with the content and information that they need to talk to their students about the content that you are pushing out. And so one thing when I was doing orientation at Alabama, I always used to tell parents and families that Alabama is just as much their community as it is their student, right? They are building a network. They should be familiar with the offices. They should feel free to be able to do outreach and contact the offices. But one thing I did find and that I shared with families is you don't know what you don't know, right? And so parents have to be the ones to go in and ask questions, but you have to be the one to make sure that it's visible and you're able to share the information with them. And so they can support their students the best way that they can. So here we're going to take a minute to allow our panelists to kind of talk a little bit about their institution. I am very familiar with Alabama. Like I said, I spent many a days there, but I want y'all to learn a little bit about the University of Alabama and also SUNY Oneonta, about what their makeup is, what makes their population different. And so I'm going to turn it over to, I guess, Dana or Randy to kind of talk a little bit about the makeup of Alabama.
Sure, I can share a little bit about our first-gen population in particular. So as you can see here, we do have about 33,000 undergraduate students. And when we work with our first-gen students out of my office, we are specifically working with our undergrads, main campus students primarily. So total population is closer to 40,000, but we are not necessarily engaging with our graduate students as much as our undergrads. So we are looking at about 15%, closer to 20, kind of looking at different data. Percent of our campus is first gen, which is really exciting. And we are seeing in the last couple of years that that number is closer to 25%. So I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see about a quarter of our undergraduate population self-identify as first gen. We are the flagship institution in the state of Alabama. But interestingly, we have a much larger out-of-state population. About 65% of our students total are out of state. However, we are in our first-gen population, we see more in-state, which makes sense. And that is certainly a focus for us, that we are trying to grow our in-state population, not just with our first-gen students, but with all of our students as well. The way that we identify our first-gen students is a question on the admissions application. It just says, what is either one of your parents' highest level of education? Then it's a drop-down menu. If they choose anything lower than a four-year college degree, that student is automatically coded as first-gen, which is an attribute in our internal system we use called Banner. And then we pull those reports from there. And then going just one step further, and then I'll turn it over to Dana or Julie to talk about their population. We have a first-gen community on campus we call Legacy Scholars. That's really how I engage with first-gen students. That is an opt-in community. So basically I reach out to all the students who identify as first gen based on their admissions application, but then true engagement comes from the population who opts in for the most part. And then there's a lot that we do outside of that, that's kind of for all first gen students, but that really intentional programming, mentorship programs, etc., those are for the students who opt into Legacy Scholars.
And I'll jump in really quickly on the parent side. We are pulling the list from the admissions application from the student. So then we connect it to the parent. And what I do with those lists is then I put them into a community and campus ESP. So, families can also then, join that first gen community themselves if they want to, but that's how I communicate to the parent and families.
Okay, I can jump in as well and just talk a little bit about SUNY Oneonta. So we have about 5,400 students, a little bit more, and we are 34% first generation, which is actually 43% of our first year students. So we have a large first generation population. The way that we identify these students is very similar to what they're doing at Bama. So there's a box on the application, and that you can check, and then it's an attribute in our internal systems. But another reason that we have such a high proportion of first generation students is that we actually have, and I just learned this recently too. We have a program here that is run by New York State that is for people who are not eligible for economic opportunity program, or sorry, educational opportunity program, the EOP programs that are for historically disadvantaged groups. So we will often have people who show need, but because they're either not a member of a historically disadvantaged group, or because their income is just a little bit too high, there is no wiggle room for EOP. We do offer something called the ACE program, which is run by New York State, and that is it's specifically for first generation students, and it does provide some funding for them to come to SUNY Oneonta. So that is part of the reason why we have such a big population. There is also no age requirement for the ACE program, so it is you could be 35 years old, and we do have a pretty significant group. We have about 100 students who are over the age of 25, and I don't know the exact statistics of how many are first gen, but it's a lot. We're currently using the family portal. Like, we're still sort of in the process of identifying a lot. I mean, even though they check the box, sometimes that doesn't mean that people are necessarily going to engage on the student side. So we have a student experience coordinator in the Office of Student Experience who does a lot of programming specifically for first gen. So we'll have events, and we'll post the flyers on CampusESP on the family portal about like planting with the president, where you get to meet the president of the college, and do some planting and just chit chat and kind of mingle, and we do things with different departments where students have opportunities to interact with faculty. And also on the portal, we do try to explain a little bit about what first gen really means, because like other people are saying, Tawana, I think it was you that said that you were first gen, but you didn't really know that you were. And some people technically are, but they don't identify as that, maybe because they don't know, or like in my case, all of my sisters and my brother went to college before me, so I didn't really necessarily feel like I identified in that way. I had a lot of help from them. And then, so we use the portal a lot to both try to promote some of the events that are being planned on our campus, and then also to get the word out about what first generation is, and that we do have a lot of support services on campus for them.
Thank you so much for that, y'all. It's great to learn about both institutions. So what I want to do now is really kind of hop into some questions, right? We know that over the years, first gen is now, the term first gen and first gen programming is becoming a hot topic. But over the last few years, how has the attitude around first gen programming changed for you all at your institutions? And Randy, if you want to hop in first.
Sure, thank you. So when I came back to campus about 8 years ago, that is actually when I first heard the term first gen, and that's when I realized, hey, I was first gen. all of a sudden my college experience makes a lot more sense. So prior to about 8 years ago, I was not in higher ed. And so I really can't speak to that. But over the last 8 years being on campus, we are seeing so much growth around our first gen engagement. And I think it comes from our students, our faculty, our staff. A lot of our staff and faculty are first gen themselves or were first gen. So they're really excited to help out this population and help out our efforts with our first gen programming. So I see a lot more excitement. I think a lot of people understand why we need to support this population and why this is an important population to support. So overall, especially since we've started this office, which I don't want to jump into I know what the next question is, and I don't want to give the answer too soon to it, but I will say being a newer office, I really can only speak to what I've experienced in this role for about the last year and a half, and it has been nothing but total support, very high levels of engagement and excitement.
Thank you. Julie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that people started noticing, and I'm not sure exactly how this trend bloomed, whether it was the students themselves kind of speaking out more, and on our campus we've through the Tri Alpha Society, which is the first generation honor society, and through our first generation task force, we've done some professional development on campus. And one of them revolved around, like, there was some, like, we watched a TED Talk about a first generation student describing their experience. And I think that as more first generation students started speaking out about, like, hey, that transition from high school where I was the smartest student in my class to college was really not easy. There was a lot I didn't know. And when I started to struggle, there was no one there to help me or to say, like, hey, part of the reason why you might be struggling is because of XYZ. So I think that as students started to speak up and as more and more faculty, as Randy mentioned, we have a lot of first generation faculty and staff on our campus. And as people started to kind of be more proactive about just discussing student needs, I think that suddenly people realized really, like the depth of the support that people did need. Navigating financial aid is incredibly complicated, even if you did, even if you have two parents who went to college and who applied for financial aid and can help walk you through that, it can be really intimidating. And if you don't necessarily have that support, it can be, sometimes it can be a barrier to entry, or, people remain silent. So one of the things that we're also trying to do on our campus is that we have stickers that people can put on their office door that says, I am first gen. So that people can identify first gen faculty and first gen staff. You can also get one that says first gen supporter if you've done professional development or training that helps you to be a little bit more empathetic to people's needs. But yeah, the attitude has really, really changed quite a bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I saw in the chat where somebody said that their first gen program has been around for 30 years. That is pretty powerful. So
Wow.
kudos to your institution for doing that. That kind of segues into our next question for our panelists. How new are your first gen offices and how are they evolving?
I'd love to jump in and share this. So my office, as I mentioned, I'm the very first person who's ever been hired into this role. So that should tell you a lot about our first gen programs office. We really established in December of 22. So we're just shy of a year and a half old. Prior to me, my role kind of was an evolution of someone's role who managed a small handful of first gen scholarships. So that was her job. She managed the scholarships, kind of worked with donors, advancement, the students. And then from there was someone who worked in our first year experience office who created the program Legacy Scholars, which was a smaller invite only program for first gen students. And those two kind of came together for this role. So when I was hired, job description, I knew that I would now be taking over Legacy Scholars and the scholarship program, as well as really working to cultivate this campus-wide first-gen community with eventual goals of creating a first-gen programs office or a center rather, not just an office, but a whole center. So I think we're a few years from that. However, we have seen, it's been really exciting in the last year and a half. It's been a labor of love, a lot of work. It has not come without some stress and anxiety of like, what the heck am I doing? Am I even doing this right? Does it even matter? But as I mentioned a minute ago, the overwhelming support that I have seen from campus entities, from the students to the faculty, to the staff, to upper administration, to my own supervisor, who has fully supported everything I've wanted to do, has been incredibly encouraging. And I would say rolling into this semester, which we're now getting ready to end, I'm finally at a point where I'm starting to feel like, okay, we have a good handle on things, but we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of growth to come. However, a month ago, I was able to hire a coordinator, which was a huge win for a brand new office. I submitted that position proposal in November, kind of a real low expectations about what would come from that. So when I found out a month later that it was approved by the provost, I was very excited. I think it goes to show that the provost office believes in what we're doing, understands that we need more support to continue with the momentum that we've seen. So just to give you an idea, so we have about, I would say about, just to give a good even number, about 5,500 first-gen students on campus, somewhere around that, undergraduate. And I have about 700 who have opted into Legacy Scholars. As I mentioned, Legacy Scholars, as its current entity, is a year old. So we started at Bama Bound last year. So this will be our second Bama Bound, where we're doing direct outreach and recruitment of first-gen students. There has never been anything like that on this campus prior to now, where we are at every tabling event. We are part of every recruiting event. We do the in-state recruitment swings. I get in front of student ambassador groups, all sorts of things to make sure First Gen has a name on campus and people know who we are. So we are evolving rapidly. We are evolving in a way that I'm like, ooh, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew, but let's just keep going. We started, when I came on board, Legacy Scholars did have a faculty staff mentoring component, which is actually how I ever knew about Legacy Scholars. When in my previous position as an advisor in our business school, I'd always been a mentor in Legacy Scholars, so I did know about it. We started with about 45 active mentor-mentee relationships, and now we're at about 140, and I have a goal of 150 for the fall semester. So that gives you an idea of the growth that we've seen. We hosted our first ever First Gen Week of Celebration, which I know a lot of institutions do that, but prior to this past November, UA was not doing that. It was 2-hour event on the National Day of Celebration, so we turned that into a whole week, and our programming has just continuously evolved. I'm getting ready to take about 45 students to our state capitol at the end of next week for an industry exploration trip. None of that was happening on this campus prior to a year ago. And so these are just the things we've implemented in 1 year that I'm really excited and sometimes overwhelmed to see keep growing into the next year. So that's kind of where we stand at UA. We're still a very new office. So happy for feedback. I love stalking other institutions' first gen programs offices online to see what y'all are doing, to learn and see what we could implement at UA. We will be at the First Gen Forward Conference in Anaheim this summer. Actually, my coordinator just registered himself today, so we'll be there. Please find us. Love to see what other institutions are doing and share also what we've been doing in the last year.
Thank you, Randy. What I hear you saying is it takes a village, pretty much, to make this happen. Dana, is there anything you want to add to that as far as parents?
Well, when I started here last year in April, we have within the Office of Parent and Family Programs, we have affinity groups. And so I wanted to find a campus partner that I felt like was really strong in what they were doing so that we could then tell the parents and family members what that information that was going on with the students to those parent and family members. Now, I don't tell them everything, but I give them, I've worked with parents for a long enough time to know what are those key things that are important that those parent and family members know that are happening so they can have conversations with their student. So.
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah, that all sounds so exciting, and I really am hoping to pick your brains a little bit more about, especially Randy. I'd love to hear more about the field trip that you're taking to the state capitol. It sounds really cool. So right now, well, our first gen initiatives are, other than the Honor Society, which I think is a couple of years old, which is Tri Alpha, we are brand new. So both myself and the first generation student coordinator, we work out of the Office of Student Experience, and we were both hired at the same time, which was last May. So we're just kind of coming up on our first year anniversary. Woo! I actually work more with the families, and she's kind of doing more things on the student end. So, you know, Sarah, who is the first gen coordinator, she's been planning a lot of the programming and doing a lot of the on-campus events. We did a big celebration last November for first gen, the National Celebration Week, and so we had all kinds of different events planned. And right now we're kind of coming up on the induction ceremony for Tri Alpha. And we have it's going to be a party. Everyone's families are invited. Everyone's coming to campus to kind of witness this celebration. And some of the things that I'm working on just going forward, a lot of more bilingual resources. A lot of our first gen families are Spanish speaking. And that is by no means the only language other than English that is spoken. Right now, we're focusing on Spanish just because it is a little bit more of a majority and we have to start somewhere. But putting resources, all of the important information that we want all families to know about, putting it in Spanish on the family portal. I love, Randy, I think it was you said that you stalk other schools. I've been stalking Northern Arizona University hard because they have such great bilingual things on their family portal. So sorry, Northern Arizona, if you're here, I love you. Thank you. But also we would like to kind of move forward with our initiatives to provide more opportunities for first gen families to mingle when they do come to our campus. So like having a first gen family mingle at orientation and then also at family weekend. I would love to offer more like webinars and things like that. And also I think that I don't ever want to overlook the fact that families already support, like, I think that sometimes we can get sort of trapped in that deficit model of like how to support the students who have this deficit because they don't have parents who went to college, or maybe it was just a sibling, or maybe they're the first person in their family to go to college. But those families already do support students in some really critical ways. So maybe, creating some videos or things where we can highlight what do families already do that creates this positive impact in their students' lives? And that could be that daily phone call that we were talking about in the beginning of this webinar. That's a huge support. And I think that, just reinforcing that to our first gen families and saying like, yeah, you know what, that is really important. Staying engaged with your student, asking questions, just checking in, even if it's just to say, I love you, and did you get the care package? Those are some things too that I'd really like to keep promoting in our office.
Thank you, Julie. And NAU is here.
Yes! Hi, NAU! Muchas gracias!
But yeah, so thank y'all for sharing that. I want to hop into some of the stats that we see in the platform from both of these powerful institutions. So by the platform, I mean CampusESP. Let me reference that. And so in SUNY's platform, SUNY Oneonta, we saw that there was a click rate of 6.5% for families just using the platform, the overall kind of click rate for all families. But with first generation families, we saw 11% click rate. And then with Alabama, we saw 5.8%. And then for first gen families, there was a 9% click rate on content that was being pushed out. What this says to me is that, and I see this all the time when I'm working with my amazing partners, and hello to all of my partners that are on the call that I work with. But what I see in the platform is that first generation families want to know information. They want to get this information. They want to be able to push it back to their students, and they also want to be informed themselves. And so a big burden lies on the institution to be able to provide them with this content. And as you can see here, this is just an important part. You can see that they are clicking on the content that both of these institutions are pushing out. And so it would be very similar at your institution as well with those first gen family members. So next we're gonna kind of move into mirroring some resources and just talk a little bit about that. So if you aren't sharing information specifically with first gen families yet, what do you need to do? Like, where do you start? And I always say that the first thing to do is to do something, like just do anything, right? Make sure that you have a strategic plan, and that you are working to do something. If that is just, again, sending an email out to families, that you're sending out to students, just start doing something that gets parents knowledgeable about the institution and what you're pushing out to their students. What we did see is, we know that open rates for students are normally around 20%, right? And if you look at, and what we see in Campus ESP is, if you look at those first gen communities and first gen families, you're going to see over, and I normally see well over 60% of an open rate. And so again, these families want the content, they want the information. Mirror what you're already sending to students, and kind of start somewhere. Alabama does an amazing job of this. I wanted to kind of highlight that, and ask Randy and Dana to kind of just talk about the communication that they send to families, and how they kind of determine, and how much. Dana, I know you mentioned that you don't send everything, but kind of what are you sending, and how are you coming up with what you send?
So one of the first things that happened, Tawana, Randy, and I met when I first started, and I learned that Randy sends an email periodically. I'm not sure if it's weekly, Randy. I can't even remember how often you send it, but I am on that email list. So what then happens is I look and see what are the things that Randy's doing, and I kind of go through those things, those activities, because we're not going to tell the parents and family members about every movie night and that type of thing. But I've spent some time and look at it and go, okay, this is definitely something. Scholarship applications, that's one thing that I did send out. Now, I choose to send this out directly as an announcement to that first gen community, so that they're getting it as an email. I can also put things in, in the portal, but like, I'd rather do it so that I know for sure that these parent and family members are getting it. So usually the email has one topic. It's not multiple. I mean, the first gen week, I did send, that whole thing, so that they knew, the parents knew everything that we were doing. But when it's really that, like Randy did a FAFSA workshop, I made sure the parents knew about that. A lot of things about financial areas, things that are more in line of their career. So, I don't send a lot, but I pick and choose some of those things. Randy, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, when it comes to first gen programming, the student engagement and the parent family engagement is so important, but they are really two very types of engagement. And so in order for me to most effectively be able to do my job on the student engagement side, I need a partner who's doing their part on the parent engagement side. If I was engaging parents and really trying to develop a parent and family community, it's going to take significant amount of time and effort away from what I'm doing on the student side. So I love college students, love them. They are my reason for being. I am excited to come to work every single day. I am not interested in working with their parents and families. And I say that with all the love in my heart. They are a very important part of my students' journey, but my passion, my purpose, the reason I'm here is for the students. But having a partner like Dana, who is kind of bridging that gap a little bit more and then bringing me in. So we did some quick filming things where I talked about what Legacy Scholars is and what we're doing in first gen programs. Then we also did a live Zoom one night with some other campus partners. That's the way that we partner together. And then of course, Dana knows if there's something a parent reaches out to her, she can certainly refer them to me. I'm not anti-parents, of course. I'm happy to talk to them. But in terms of where my time and energy goes with program development and why that matters and what we're doing, it's got to lean to the student side. So that's why this partnership is so important. And Campus ESP creates a great opportunity to engage with those families. I specifically choose to send my emails like popcorn email style. I do not do a weekly newsletter because I know that when I get weekly newsletters, I ignore them half the time because it becomes something I'm routinely seeing. So I like the way that Dana kind of popcorns our announcements because that's how I do our students. That way, when they see Randy Ham's name pop up in their email, they theoretically read it, because it's not just a routine email that they're getting. And I only send, I don't blast them with emails. I try to keep it to no more than one a week, and sometimes it's even one every 2 weeks. So the partnership is so important, and Campus ESP is so important, because Dana can't send these like big emails just from her personal email to all the parents who are engaged. This platform creates that opportunity, whereas I can get a little bit more on that personal level with the students and send that email directly to their inbox from my email. But Campus ESP has really helped bridge that gap between what I'm trying to do, but yet how important that parent and family engagement is. So that's all that I would add as far as kind of like the way Dana, and it was a very organic thing. She decides what to send. It was never a conversation of like, here's how we are strategically going to do this. Dana's just really good at what she does, and I think I'm decent at what I do. And so every now and again, she'll send an email saying, hey, do you mind if I share this with the parents? And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Or actually, no, you know what? I want this to be intentionally just for students, or really want students who are engaged to be a part of this, etc. So our relationship's very organic, which creates great organic connection with the parents and families as well.
Thank you for that, Randy. So I want to kind of hop into the next slide, and I want you to remember that 59% that I told you about parents, that first-gen parents and families that are talking to their student on a regular. And what I want you to really think about is the fact that you can showcase, again, your programming and your opportunities with your students through their family members, right? You can get their family members to communicate that with them and get students to really attend your special events. Kind of like Dana said, you're not going to send everything out to them, but the events that you find valuable are the ones that you're going to be able to push out to these parents and family members. And so I want to go to the next slide and allow our panelists to kind of talk about the programs that they have for first-gen students and how they share these programs with their families. And so, Julie, we'll start with you. If you can just kind of talk a little bit about things that you're doing and how you, again, share this with your family.
Right. So again, I work similar to, the two other panelists here. I work together with another person who is the person who's kind of designing their programs and planning them. And without her doing that, I would not know necessarily what I want the families to know, because I can guess, and I can be like, oh, I think there's something going on this week with first gen, but I happen to have this lovely colleague who, makes sure that I get all of her flyers and then I know everything that's going on. So we had a big first gen celebration week. And one of the things that, because we're still a very new organization and because not everybody on our campus even knows if they're first gen, one of the things that we did that week was just a tabling event, like, come on in and like, who are you first gen? Come to our table, get a pin, get a button, get a big foam finger that says I am, one of those like #1 things that they have at the sporting events. We have those that are, for first gen. And, so coming down to just identify yourself and then learning more about the other programs that are going on during the week. There was a happy hour mingle, so you could meet other students. Sometimes I think that and happy hour, of course, mocktails. Sorry, let me just make that clear. Just knowing that there are other people out there that are like you that might be struggling with some of the same things you're struggling with, or who can laugh about some of the same things that you didn't know. Oh, I had no idea that, people didn't call it the lunchroom or they called it the dining hall or whatever it is. Finding those other people, and then providing opportunities for our first gen students to meet with faculty and to meet with also the professional offices. I also work personally with a lot of what people sometimes call non-traditional students, so our student veterans and our students over the age of 25. And there are effective barriers to going into an office. People think that we kind of take it for granted because we work in higher ed. Oh, I need to go into the financial aid office. I'm just going to march right in. And we forget that sometimes that younger people in general and people who maybe don't know a lot about how college works have a lot of anxiety just about taking these steps to go talk to a faculty member or go into financial aid or find the registrar or or sign up for that work study scholarship that you know you have, but you got to find the bursar's office to go get it. So just always kind of sharing resources. And then I do my part to share all of that with families. I try to take the outlook that designing for first generation families and designing programming for first generation students actually benefits everybody. Because you might think you know it all about college, but there might be something you don't know. And so by making all this information as transparent and as clear as possible, we help people who, you know, might be sending their first child to college, and maybe they went to college so long ago and things are different, and they're like, I don't know if things are the same. So by reaching out to first generation families, and by supporting those students on our campuses, I think that we do make the campus a better place for all the students.
Yeah, thank you. Another thing that I kind of want to highlight that I think our institutions here do well is really creating a space for parents and family members outside of just being in person or sending emails. One of those things that they do, and I think Alabama does it very well, is really facilitate some virtual calls and engagement during orientation, during the summer, throughout the semester. And so if you could really briefly talk about what you all are doing there, that would be great.
So we did two different things this past fall, Randy and I. One was a recorded call that parents and families could see at any point in time that we put on YouTube. And then the second was a live call that we then did record and sent it to the parents and families later. So we definitely, you know, I think during COVID, it was much easier for people to join at a certain time. We had more clicks afterward on those YouTube, you know, URLs. So, you know, Randy and I will kind of talk through it for the coming year. But the first call was more of a general, this is Randy, this is who she is, all the things that she does within the office. And then the second call, we focused on some of the resources that we have on campus.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dana. So kind of transitioning to outside of just virtual events, can you talk a little bit about some of the in-person events that you all host for parents and family members? I know when I was at Alabama, we kind of started a lot of affinity groups and engaging them in that capacity. But can you just talk a little bit about First Gen and then some of the affinity groups things that you all do?
So this year for Family Weekend, Randy hosted an open house. We have many open houses on the Friday of Family Weekend, and Randy jumped in as well and did an open house for parents and family members to come with their student to where the First Gen office is, which that's really cool. And then, you know, because some students may have never even seen it, and so we had a good turnout there. I do know for the future we would like to do something for this coming up fall, is we have a kickoff on the Friday evening. It's a concert, and Randy, I think, wants to host a little tent there to allow, because we have a concert where people just sit around and listen to the music, and allow those First Gen families to congregate in that area, in a special area. So there's, you know, different things that we're doing. I know that there's going to be more things that we do in the future, but we're trying to focus on the times that those families are here at the same time and do events then.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
I mean, I know that we're hoping to get into that soon. That's next year. We just got through our first year, but we are hoping to do a lot more with family orientation and family weekend, and trying to do more on-campus things for First Gen families.
Awesome. So we also know that our First Gen families, this is not their only identity, right? They intersect in other areas as well. And so I think being the account manager for SUNY, I saw some great things that SUNY Oneonta, great things that they were doing was engaging families outside of just being First Gen. And so, Julie, if you could just talk briefly, just kind of about what you all are doing and how you're engaging these families that are also maybe First Gen, but also may also have other identities as well.
So like I said before, I think that, you know, maybe just kind of thinking of them as being having overlapping needs with some of the other families, in addition to maybe some unique needs. My whole thing too is like resources. Like anytime there is something that, you know, regarding mental health or course registration or things that where it's an opportunity for us to highlight, like, hey, did you know that the counseling center is free and that these are the hours and that they do online things? Did you know that there's new course registration, like they're doing a computer update, they're like, this is happening. So always kind of like anything that's especially time sensitive, making sure that I have that in English and in Spanish, you know, whether it's information about you know, the bus that we run that goes for spring break, is, you know, the advising, you know, if they're doing extended hours for spring registration or something like that. Like those are the things that I really always want to make sure that I have tagged on the portal for first gen families, and then I'm putting them on there in Spanish, so that, because that's the information I think that really is unique to the families of first gen students, because they really might not know, like, you know, what are these offices and what do they do.
Thank you, Julie. So we touched on this, but I want to just remind you that you don't have to do it all on your own, right? You see here that partnerships and a village is a big part of making things work for first gen families. And so make sure that you are tapping into the resources that you already have on campus, just like Dana works very well with Randy, and they have that partnership to holistically support the student through the lens of their parent and the student as well. And so making sure that you understand that you have people on your campus that care and that want to support you. And then I want to talk about a small part of a study that we did, a survey that we did here on with Campus ESP, understanding that efforts are so important to the success of your students. So really gauging and understanding the data that we have in Campus ESP and the things that you can push out to understand what supports your student. So again, this is some data that we had where we looked at retention gains of our parents and family members that were receiving content from Campus ESP. And what we found that for first generation families, there is a higher percentage of retention gains if their parent or family member is in Campus ESP and receiving content from the institution. This does not necessarily have to be Campus ESP, but if you are sending out content, these families are going to be able to help support their student a lot better by having the knowledge. If they don't know where accounts receivable is or the financial aid office, they don't know that content or that information, they're not going to be able to support their student. And so I want to charge you, as we kind of start to conclude here, is really take a look at what you can do to make sure that you are getting this content in front of families. We've shown you that they want it. They are very eager to be able to provide conversations with their students. And so again, they're talking to their students on a regular, about 59%. And so making sure that you all are pushing the information out to these parents and family members. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mel here to kind of do some last minute things. And then we're going to have some time for a few questions.
Yeah, I feel like I need to fly through these because we only have about 5 minutes officially, and we do have some questions I want to make sure we take advantage of. So I'm not really going to talk to this. This will be in your recording if you want, but there are plenty of resources on our site if you want more information. Moving on. Also, we're going to hop into the questions now, but if I do not get to your question or you have one that you have not shared, our panelists have so kindly offered up their personal email addresses, so you can reach out to them one-on-one if there's something that we just don't get to in the next couple of minutes. But now let's get to those questions. All right, so the first question that I've got here is, why segment out communications to first generation students or families? I can think that one of your answers is probably going to be retention. What other value is there to focus directly on this group? And I know who wants to take this one first. If someone's got a strong opinion, you can just hop on in.
I have a strong opinion as a former first gen student. So yes, the answer is retention and graduation. data, we see at UA that our retention is about 15 points lower for our first-gen students, and so are our graduation rates. So absolutely, that is why it is so important that we focus on this population. But I specifically care so much about this population because I know that if I had just had someone who tapped me on the shoulder to say, you're capable of this, you belong here, or have you applied for this? Did you audition for this? I know that my own college experience would have been much more robust and much more memorable. I went from a very large public high school in Montgomery, Alabama, where I was the student council president, cheerleader, best all around, et cetera, et cetera. And then I came to UA and very quickly kind of went into a shell and said, I don't think I belong here. These people seem to know what they're doing. I'm not like the rest of this campus. We have a very large Greek population. I chose not to go Greek. And so I looked around the room and thought, I don't think I'm the cutout for these type of leadership positions. And that was a huge miss. So it's a really big deal to me that we are building up our first-gen students to let them know, like, not only do you belong here, but like we need you here and you absolutely belong in those leadership positions. Our newest SGA president is actually a first-gen student, which is a pretty huge deal at the University of Alabama. So really exciting time for our community right now.
I love that, Randy. As you might have noticed, I started scribbling things down as you were talking. That was some good stuff there. There's another one here who says, I'm curious how you foster relationships with first generation families all year long beyond that first time in orientation. How strong is that engagement? Are you able to get these families to volunteer for programs, fundraising, first generation week, et cetera?
I mean, I will let you know what's one of the initiatives that we're going to try to work on soon is trying to get them to volunteer. And, I think that just having people like going out there, going to, having that first gen table at your open house and being able to meet families at the time that they do come to campus and just being like, I had a student who reached out to me last year who was struggling, and she was first gen, and she said, my parents met you in orientation and you spoke Spanish to them and they really appreciated that. And then they thought that maybe that if, I asked you for some help, that maybe you could help me. So we do hope to build on just these tiny relationships, but as Tawana said earlier, you just have to start somewhere. And right now, I will let everyone know if there's a part 2 to this. I'll let you know how our efforts to get people engaged throughout the year are working out.
I know we only have like 1 minute, but Dana, you all do a great job with our PAC, our Parent Advisory Council, and recruiting first-gen families to represent the rest of the first-gen community. So can you talk just about that briefly?
So I tag on really quick. We are communicating all year long, and I do more in the fall, less in the spring, because that's when the student becomes more independent. But on the Parent Advisory Council side, we have a Parent Advisory Council that is made up of 50 parents and family members that they apply. And then we know some demographics about each one. So I try to get a smaller subset of first-gen parents that are on that committee so that they are representative of those parents. Those are the parents that volunteer and are engaged in different things so our parents are not specifically helping with first gen programs. They're helping with general, like they volunteer family weekend. We had something for our honors day last Friday that we had some PAC members at. So we have a subset in that Parent Advisory Council.
Awesome. Well, we are at time, and I can see the numbers dropping down because I'm sure everybody has a next meeting already scheduled on their books. We know how that goes. So thank you very much to everybody who was able to join us for today. Thank you to our amazing panelists, Dana, Randy, Julie, really appreciate it. Tawana, thank you for leading our conversation. Like I said, you'll get this recording and this deck in your inbox. So hopefully it proves helpful and helps you guys improve how you're reaching out to all families as well, but definitely to our first generation population and helping them elevate their students to some success. So thank you again, and everybody just have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.